Chapter 6. The Woman in the Silver Scarf. As soon as I got to the bus stop the next day, I told Josie and Tom and Michael everything my mum had told me about refugee kids, and about how the new boy had probably had to get on a boat with no toilets on it so that he could run away from bombs and all the other bad things that the bullies had done to his country. But my dad said refugee kids are dangerous and that they lie and steal things, said Josie, looking confused. He told me to stay away from the new boy and not to talk to him because he was probably a criminal. But my mum and dad said we should be extra nice to him. Look. And opening up his rucksack, Tom showed us a big bag of sweets. Mum said to give these to him at lunchtime. And she said we have to be nice to him and not to ask too many questions. My mum said the same, said Michael, as we got on the bus to school, except she told me to give him a banana. And my dad said refugee kids were running away from the war that's on the television all the time. He didn't say anything about any bullies. We all looked over at Josie, who was chewing on the ends of her hair and frowning. She didn't say anything, but I knew she was thinking that her dad must have made a mistake. There was no way the new boy could be dangerous or a criminal. Not when he was the same size as us and had just run away from bullies in a real war. Mr. Thompson had taught us all about wars last year. It had been a special year for wars, and Mrs. Sanders said it was our duty not to forget about them. We learned about red poppies and how they were the most important flower because they grew on soldiers' graves, and about how lots of countries had joined up to fight the very first war. The upper years did an assembly about it, and we went on a special day trip to the Tower of London where the Queen keeps her crown, because that's where millions of red poppies had been put in its gardens and stuck on its walls. Mr. Thompson said we should never forget how many people have died in wars to save us. But I can't remember long numbers, especially ones that keep going up all the time. But I'll never forget that castle. It had looked like it was bleeding. And later on that day, a man who knew all about the first big war gave us an extra special lesson inside the castle. His name was Officer Denny. I remember him because his name rhymed with my Uncle Lenny's. Everyone liked him because he was funny and knew everything there was to know about bombs and uniforms and a sad place called Flanders Field. He picked me and Michael to try and hold up a rucksack that was the same size and weight as a real soldier's rucksack, but it was so big and heavy that we couldn't even lift it up off the ground. Remembering Officer Denny's rucksack made me wonder if the new boy had to carry lots of heavy things in his rucksack when he was running away. Maybe that's why it looked so old and dusty. He still didn't have a new one, but that week he had started to wear the school uniform. He must have found the new shirt and jumper itchy because he kept pulling at the collar whenever he thought no one was looking. That day the bus to school was late and got stuck in so much traffic that the driver let everyone get off early. We had to run half the way, and by the time we got to the playground, the bell had started ringing. I was hot and sweaty and feeling icky when we got into class, so I didn't realise that everyone was quieter than usual. But after a few minutes, I noticed that Parvinder and Dean, who were clever at everything and sat at the front of the class, kept looking over their shoulders. At first I thought they were looking at me because my face was still red, but then I heard Parvinder say, "Wonder who she is." I turned round and saw a grown-up sitting in Clarissa's seat. Not just any old grown-up, but one who was talking to the new boy, and the new boy was talking back to her. I poked Josie in the arm and said, "Look." Josie turned around and whispered, "Where's Clarissa?" We looked around the classroom and then saw that Clarissa was sitting at the end of our row on Felicity and Natasha's table. She looked much happier. "Hurry up and settle down, please," said Mrs. Khan as she picked up the register. "Before we head to assembly, I want to introduce you to someone very special to you, but let's make sure you're all here first." After she had finished calling everyone's names, Mrs. Khan said, "Now, class, I want you all to say good morning to Miss Hemsey, our new class assistant." Miss Hemsey stood up and smiled at everyone. "Good morning, Miss Hemsey," we all said. Half the class shouted it out, and the other half said it quietly, as if they weren't quite sure Mrs. Khan had given them the right name to say. I shouted it out. I like shouting out new names. It makes them feel more real. Miss Hemsey smiled and said, "Good morning, everyone." Miss Hemsey will be helping Amit with his lessons from now on. If we're very lucky, in a few weeks, she'll be helping Amit do a presentation about his hometown and how he feels about being here in London. Everyone turned to stare at Miss Hemsey as she nodded and smiled, and then sat back down. "She looks nice," whispered Josie. "I like her scarf." I looked back over my shoulder because I liked the scarf Miss Hemsey was wearing on her head too. It looked like a silver river, and it had a diamond pin clipped onto one of the sides that looked like a star. She had one of those smiles where the person smiling never shows any teeth, but I liked it. And her eyes looked like they'd been drawn around with a thick black pencil, which made them look bigger and more interesting. The new boy seemed to like her too, and when she sat back down, she whispered something to him and patted him on the back, which made him nod. I felt happy for him. He had someone to talk to, and he didn't have to sit next to Clarissa any more. It's much nicer to sit next to someone who isn't always trying to get away from you all the time and has a diamond pin in her scarf. All that day, the new boy did his lessons at the back of the class, and at break time and lunch time he went to seclusion as usual. But maybe because Miss Hemsey was with him, he didn't look at the ground so much, and seemed more interested in everything we were doing. I caught him staring at me and Josie twice before lunchtime and 3 whole times in the afternoon, and I was sure he wanted to be friends with us now. At home time we waited, just as we always did, by the gates. But this time all of us had something to give him. Josie had saved her chocolate yoghurt pudding from her lunchbox, for him especially, and Michael and Tom had the bag of sweets and the banana their mums and dads had told them to save. Today I had an apple to give him, because the school canteen had run out of oranges. But it was okay, because Tom had given me a sticker of a whale to put on it, so it was still special. As we were waiting, I crossed my fingers and secretly hoped that Miss Hemsey would come out with the new boy too, because since she could speak to him properly, she'd be able to ask him some of my 11 questions. The playground had started to empty by the time the new boy had finally come out, holding both Miss Hemsey's and Mrs. Khan's hands, as they made their way over to the woman in the red scarf. Michael whispered, "Come on." I could tell he was excited, because his eyes had gotten wider. Michael's eyes always get wider when he can't wait to do something. We all ran over to the new boy and gave him our gifts. "This is from me," said Tom, holding out the large bag of sweets like it was a trophy. There were cola bottles in there, and flying Whizbees, and some toffee melts too. "And this is from me," said Josie, holding out the chocolate pudding. "It's my favourite." This is just a banana, but look," said Michael, turning it over to show the new boy the row of stick men he had drawn on it. "And this is from me," I said, holding out the apple. The new boy looked up, his arms full, and gave us each a happy nod. I could tell it was a happy nod, and not just an ordinary nod, because even though his mouth wasn't smiling, his lion eyes looked happy. Miss Hemsey bent down and said something in a foreign language to the new boy's ears. He nodded, and then looking up at us, said very slowly, "Thank you, friends." Josie, Michael, Tom, and me nodded and beamed, and then all at once started talking. "Do you want to come and play football with us tomorrow?" shouted Tom. "At break time?" "I'll get you another one of those puddings tomorrow if you like them," exclaimed Josie. "I'll ask Mum to give me something better than a banana," cried out Michael. "What about some mini muffins?" "And I'm going to get something better than an apple tomorrow. What's your favourite fruit?" I asked. The new boy looked at us, and then looked up at Miss Hemsey and Mrs. Khan, and then at the woman in the red scarf. They were all smiling, and the woman in the red scarf ruffled his hair, just like my mum had ruffled my hair the night before. "Now, kids," said Mrs. Khan, bending down so that her face was the same height as ours. "These are all wonderful gifts, and I know Amit is thankful for them, but he needs to learn just a little bit more English before he can answer your questions, okay?" We all looked at each other, and then at Mrs. Khan, and then nodded. "But I do think that's a very good idea of yours, Tom. Maybe Amit would like to play football with you tomorrow at break time." Miss Khan looked over at Miss Hemsey, who gave a nod. "Yes, that's a very good idea." "Awesome," said Tom, and he was so excited that he gave the new boy a thump on the arm. The new boy looked at Tom, and then at his arm, as if he wasn't quite sure what had just happened. "And there's no need to give him so many presents every day," said the woman in the red scarf, laughing. "It's so lovely, but we don't want to rot Amit's teeth now, do we?" We all shook our heads. "If you still want to give him something at home time, just choose one thing between you all, and that'll be more than enough, okay?" We all nodded, and then I cried out, "Miss Hemsey!" I hadn't meant to say it so loudly, but I was so excited at the thought of having one of my questions answered that I couldn't help myself. "Yes," smiled Miss Hemsey. "Can I, where is he from? Like, which country? And what language does he speak?" I asked, looking at the new boy. Miss Hemsey's smile widened. even though she still didn't show any of her teeth. Ahmet is from a country called Syria, and he speaks a language called Kurdish. Do you speak that and English? Asked Josie, looking impressed. Yes, said Miss Hemsey. I'm Syrian too. Why doesn't Ahmet speak any English? Asked Tom. Well, said Miss Hemsey, because in Syria nobody needs to speak English, just like you don't need to speak a Syrian language here in England. Oh. The answer made Tom frown to himself, which meant he was asking himself lots of other questions in his head. Now, kids, off you go, said Miss Khan, clapping her hands. Ahmet needs to get going, and so do you. And Tom. I notice you're wearing your brother's trainers by mistake again. Try and make it the last time, okay? Yes, miss, said Tom, as he turned bright red. We waved goodbye and headed to our bus stop. Just before we turned the corner, I looked over my shoulder and saw the new boy take a big bite of the apple I had given him. I felt even happier than I did when Miss Hemsey had answered my questions. But a second later, the feeling quickly disappeared, because that was when I saw Brendan the bully. He was standing in front of the boys' toilets, just a few yards away, and his cheeks were pink and his eyes were narrow, and he was watching the new boy with a scowl on his face. Everyone knows that Brendan the bully hates anyone who's different from him, but it was the first time I had seen him look so angry and mean. He couldn't do anything, because Miss Hemsey and Mrs. Khan and the lady in the red scarf were there, but as we headed to our bus stop and all the way home, I couldn't help feeling worried. I think I knew right away that the scowl was a warning, and that he was going to make things hard for the new boy and anyone who wanted to be friends with him. And it turns out that I was right, because at first break, on the very next day, that's exactly what he started doing.